as we proceed. We have a seminar which we should have started at 10. I'm a communist. Communists are known for time, so I worried when it's now way past the 10 o'clock. So our apologies, we're still trying to link with our main speaker in Cape Town. We are holding this seminar on the Africa Day. In 1963, the African leaders came together to establish Organization of African Unity. In 2002, it was renamed the African Union. We have this theme, instability on the continent and the African Continental Free Trade Area, the constructing implications. This is the theme that we are discussing in this seminar. We hope that by 1 p.m. we will be done. We've invited the former Minister of Trade and Industry, Comrade Rob Davies, to I'm advised that those that are driving should park on B2, not B1. Thank you. I was saying that we have invited the former Minister of Trade and Industry, Comrade Rob Davies, to speak to us. We are honored to have, is linking us up online. We are honored to have Lela, Nontobe Onhlela, my sister. I wouldn't want to call her comrade because I'm not sure if she want to be addressed in that manner. She's from Tricontinental Institute for Social Research. Will be speaking to us, making a presentation. With Comrade Ian Bidos, is an internationalist with a vast experience in the political economy of Africa, will be speaking to us. We know that in 2013, the African Union adopted the theme, silencing the guns in Africa, and the guns are not silent. We have thus invited a Sudanese national, who is the former ADF chairperson, Dr. Elgoni, Abdul Karim Elgoni, to speak to us on what is happening in Sudan. We have invited Dr. Brown Maba from the Heritage and Research Consultant to speak to us as well. So what we are going to do, we'll start with the minister to speak to us, and the other speakers will speak. Then at the end of all the presentations, we'll open the floor for presentations. We have requested our speakers that they will speak for 20 minutes. So we request that you take notes. So once again, we welcome you all to our seminar. So without wasting time, let me ask the minister to give us his presentation. Over to you, Minister.
Okay, well, thanks. Thank you very much, Comrade Chair. Let me say that, as you did say, I'm a former minister, probably more relevant to the subject I'm going to be presenting on. I'm a member on the Advisory Council of Industrialization and Trade that's convened by the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area. So quite a bit of what I'm going to say is sort of approach that the Advisory Council under the leadership of the Secretary General is trying to carve out for the Continental Free Trade Area. I think probably I should just say before I start, because I do have some slides, is that my implicit point of departure, which I'm not going to develop, is that the underdevelopment of the African continent, which is also at the roots of many of the issues of insecurity and conflict, derives from the fact that during colonialism, the continent was subordinated to the global north, the developed world, as producer and exporter of primary raw materials that we used in industrial processes elsewhere. And that our leaders from the time of Kwame Nkrumah onwards identified that it was necessary to move towards higher value-added production and to industrialize the continent. So if someone could put up my slides, please. The first couple of slides I just want to go very quickly through the basic architecture of the Continental Free Trade Area. What is it about? So the agreement of the African Continental Free Trade Area was signed by 54 of the 55 member states of the African Union. If you want to know who didn't, it's Eritrea. And by February of this year, 46 countries had deposited their instruments of ratification. So the formal membership is all up and done. The agreement entered into force in May 2019, when the required majority of countries, the required minimum of countries had actually ratified it. And during the phase one of the establishment of the CFTA, there's supposed to be the establishment of a free trade agreement, which is covering both trading goods and trading services. And the free trade agreement on trading goods, all the members of the Continental Free Trade Area are supposed to remove duties on 90% of their tariff lines over 5 years for those countries that are not least developed, and over 10 years for those countries that are least developed. And of the remaining 10% of tariff lines, 7% are to be designated sensitive, and the duties there are to be phased down over a slightly longer period, which is 10 years for non-least developed countries and 13 years for least developed countries. And only 3% of the tariff lines may be excluded altogether. That's the basic architecture of the trading goods agreement. The state parties are supposed to make offers and negotiate with each other. So you're supposed to offer, you're supposed to say, these are the tariff lines that I will remove duties of 90% on over 5 years. These are the ones I want to remove duties over 10 years, and these are the 3% I'm going to leave out. And you have to put that forward to all the other parties and negotiate over that. Most I think of members have done that already, but quite a lot of them have said that their offers are conditional on what ends up being agreed on something called rules of origin. And those rules of origin, they define the percentage of local content that has to be in a product that qualifies to be admitted duty-free in other parts of the continent. So the idea is goods that are produced on the continent, with of course some inputs coming from elsewhere, and the rules of origin define what that is. And the rules of origin on most lines are already agreed, but not on some of the sensitive areas like clothing and textiles, sugar, and automotive products. The trade in services liberalisation is also supposed to be taking place, but in defined sectors. So it's what's called a positive list. It doesn't say all sectors except the following. It says it only takes place in the sectors that we specifically outline, and the sectors that have already agreed are travel services, transport services, business services, telecommunication services, and financial services. So the next slide is telling us that the other protocols that is part of this that have to be negotiated and come into forth in phase one, which is the current phase, are the rules of origin I've already mentioned, agreements on cooperation between customs administrations, agreements on something called trade facilitation, those are procedures to allow goods to enter countries, sanitary and phytosanitary regulations, these are the regulations that cover plant health, animal health, and so on, particularly agricultural products. And then the agreement provides for negotiations on what are called trade-related issues, investment agreement, intellectual property, competition, and a few others, which are supposed to enter into force in phase two. And the declaration says that the Continental Free Trade Area will contribute to the movement of capital and natural persons, but the movement of natural persons is left to other processes within the African Union. And the agreement also sets up institutions. So the heads of state are the top of the pyramid who oversee the process. There's a council of ministers. There's negotiating forums of officials. And then there's a secretariat, and the secretariat was established in 2020. It's based in Ghana, and the first Secretary General is Wamkeli Mene. Now, the next slide. African Continental Free Trade Area as a bloc. It's important, I think, to get this into perspective. It will be the world's 8th largest economy as a total bloc, with a combined gross domestic product of 2.5 trillion US dollars. So it's 8th behind the US, behind China, Japan, Germany, the UK, France, and India. The combined population of the Continental Free Trade Area is about 1.2 billion people, and it's hoped that the Continental Free Trade Area will boost intra-Africa trade by $30 to $40 billion annually and reduce the continent's overall trade deficit by half. That's the stated intent. So that's the sort of basic architecture of the Continental Free Trade Area. Let me say in the next slide that I think there were different kinds of ideas that underpinned the establishment of the free trade area. Some of them were pure trade. Trade liberalization was a good thing. Trade liberalization would lead to development. You have arrangements like this in the European Union, so let's have something like this for ourselves. You also had views coming up that trade liberalization is important towards the rest of the world, that we must all reduce and remove tariffs on the rest of the world. This is the globalization and neoliberal kind of argument. And there were people around who saw, particularly from outside the continent, who saw the Continental Free Trade Area as a stepping stone towards liberalization towards the world outside. But I think there's another view, which is called developmental regionalism or development integration, which actually says that what we need to really do is to use this larger market that's being created as a result of the free trade area. And we need to use this as a tool to actually make steps towards industrializing. And if we look at the world and we see what's happened, particularly after the Great Recession of 2007-8, we see a country like China, which initially had started its industrialization by supplying finished manufactured goods to the developed world. It actually saw that there was a declining market, and also the developed world was becoming less and less reluctant to accept finished goods from developing countries. And so it turned to its domestic market, and it also then used its industrial policy to try to develop real technological leads in digital technology and green technology. And I think if you look around, you can see a country like India is also marching in a similar direction. But both of these countries have large populations and large domestic markets that can be a significant, although not exclusive, driver of development. Next slide, please. But if we look at individual African countries, we lack either the population or the domestic market to be a significant driver of any kind of deep industrialization. Even our regional economic communities are relatively modest. So SADC, for example, has 345 million people, which is about the same as the United States, but its combined GDP of $721 billion is just a bit more than Poland and slightly less than Switzerland. So it's not really offering us the scale. But a bloc that's the size of the world's 8th largest economy with 1.2 billion people would be the sort of bloc that could provide a thrust towards industrialization. But how would this happen? Next slide, please. I'm saying that there's a growing view that the operationalization of the Continental Free Trade Area cannot be just reduced to a trade arrangement, cannot just be reduced to all of these matters that I mentioned as part of the basic architecture. It needs to be accompanied and allow itself to be shaped by the construction of regional value chains. So what does that mean? So I'm saying that the term value chain refers to the full range of activities needed to create a product or services. Encompasses everything from the conception of the product, the service that's going to be provided to its final distribution, includes the raw materials, acquisition of those, the manufacturing of all the components, the final assembly and packaging, marketing, branding, transport, logistics, and all that. That's a value chain. Now, there was an idea of global value chains. I'm speaking to the next slide, please. Global value chains that was advanced during the era of globalization, hyper-globalization, and neoliberalism. And it was saying that as a result of globalization, what we've got is we've got an increasing number of products that you can't identify any longer as products of any one country because they've got components from many countries assembled in many parts of the world and supplied to many parts of the world. And so that what they wanted to say was the products that were products of the world were replacing products of individual countries. Next slide, please. But the idea that they had at the time was that the way you become part of this, these global value chains were where the highest quality value addition was taking place in the world. Well, the way you got into them was that you integrated yourself by liberalizing your tariffs towards the rest of the world, and you integrated yourself that way into value chains. Now, the problem with this, and as critics argued, was that it escaped a fundamental reality. The problem facing Africa is not that we are not in value chains, global value chains. We are, but we're in the wrong place. We're supplying the raw materials, which is the least and declining, the least valuable and declining place to be located in value chains. And that's the problem we've got. So it's not whether you're in or out, it's where you're located in the value chain. So we need to move from being just raw material producers to being producers of more diversified and value-added products. So the next slide, please. So the construction of regional value chains, I think as is increasingly been seen, needs to be something more there's something quite different from the global value chains through liberalization that is envisaged by the proponents of neoliberalism. So I include, and I've got a slide here that includes a quotation from two people who argue that to construct a regional value chain, you need to develop capacity to identify appropriate measures to strengthen regional cooperation. Deepening regional specialization and exchange needs an institutional framework to identify realistic projects, manage trade-offs between countries, and secure alignment around regulatory framework, trade facilitation, infrastructure development, and maintenance. Next slide. So what this is trying to say is that if we're going to build regional value chains, we actually need to have an active set of industrial, technology, and trade policies combined into a framework with some sort of institutional structure that is supporting the emergence of this across the value chains. If we built the value chains, we would start to see several countries producing components for products that could be assembled in one or more countries before being supplied to several countries, if not all countries, on the African continent. And this, of course, requires an active industrial policy. If this happened, we would not just see an increase in intra-regional trade, we'd see a change in its quality. We'd see more trade in intermediate products, which is actually the largest and fastest growing component of international trade that's taking place. So this is what we would need to see, and we would have to agree on the regulatory frameworks. There are many important regulations for industrial policy that are now national competences. We need greater harmonization of those. We need to identify and agree these through stakeholder engagement and research. And it definitely, when we talk about regulation, it's not about deregulation. It must also be us acting together to say that before we are willing to sell you raw materials, for example, we will insist on a certain level of processing. We will not simply become a dumping ground for your second-hand goods, which is a big issue in clothing and textiles and also in automotive products. Next slide, please. Then we also need to manage trade-offs. Smaller and less industrialized countries, and this is what we see now in the current discussions on rules of origin. They are able to perhaps attract people who come to them and say, we'll invest in your country in some industrial activity, but it'll be a very low level of industrial activity. We will allow you to sew the buttons onto the shirts that we have manufactured, and then we want you to advocate for these products to be sold throughout the continent. In other words, the rules of origin would have to be weak. Now, the problem with that is that the biggest beneficiaries of the Continental Free Trade Area would not be the locally produced products, some of which would have a higher value added would probably be excluded, but they would be the people who are bringing goods in from the rest of the continent. So I think these are the issues that need to be managed with a goal of promoting greater inclusivity in a context where we need to bring in all the various stakeholders. And there's quite a lot of, next slide please, there's quite a lot of work that's being done. Some of it's still in the level of informal discussions to identify possibilities and identify the kinds of regional value chains we need to be building. Now, the other issue I think that's important is the external orientation of the Continental Free Trade Area. So while it is a focus on a set of arrangements among ourselves, the relationship of the Continental Free Trade Area to the rest of the world is also an important issue. If we do not provide a significant margin of preference for products produced within the Continental Free Trade Area over competing products from the outside, we will lose the opportunities that it would create to support industrialization. So, although it's not going to be something that we necessarily need to adopt formally by moving to a customs union or something like that, we do need to have a greater coordination of positions about attitudes towards third parties who should be told that if you want to benefit from the Continental Trade Area, you come and establish a productive enterprise in one of our countries, and that you add value to our products, and then you will be able to qualify under the rules of origin, not by you coming along and benefiting because we are going to open up and allow you to bring your finished goods and benefit from the Continental Trade Area. So I'm saying the rollout of that requires a whole lot of coordination of issues. Now the heads of state, next slide please, the heads of state have agreed to prioritize the rollout of 4 global value chains. These are pharmaceuticals and medical devices. And one of the reasons for this was pretty obvious, that in COVID we saw that there was this thing called vaccine apartheid. That when the vaccines were available, the last place on earth to get the vaccines was our countries. So from that, we need to have more productive activity around pharmaceuticals. Agriculture and agro-processing. This is an area where Africa has real potentiality. We have 60% of the world's cultivatable land. Automotive products is another area where there's a lot of work going on, and other transport equipment. And as I already mentioned, the Secretary General is prioritizing this. So I'm just saying that, by way of conclusion, that an approach that sees the Continental Free Trade Area as a driver of regional value chains is what I think we need to be developing. The last slide is that to say that this is going to take place through the process of consultation, negotiation, and the establishment of the kind of regulatory frameworks, as well as addressing some of the issues of investment finance and all the other things that are necessary to bring into place productive activity. What I can say by way of my last remark is that if we don't do this, as the world moves into very rapidly now into this low carbon economy, we'll be left behind, and we will be just mere consumers of somebody else's products, while big changes are taking place, which could actually well mean that some of our existing industries are no longer able to function. So it's very, very important that we use this tool as a means of trying to promote economic diversification, move up the value chain, and in a word, enhance industrial development. So let me stop there and say thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much to Comrade Rob Davies, the former Minister of Industry, Trade and Industry. Is in Cape Town. We also invited comrades from the ANC. I'm sure they are here. Just across the road, Luthuli House, we have comrades from COSATU. I'm not sure if they've arrived. I see my comrades from the Communist Party, the Communist Party of Swaziland and the YCL. Thank you for attending, and all of you, thank you for coming. As I said, thanks Comrade Rob for all this information. I hope you will stay with us a little bit longer so that comrades can field the questions. But if we will not have much time, we will arrange questions to get to Comrade Rob so that we can continue with this engagement outside this seminar. As I said earlier on, that we invited Comrade Dobego from the Tricontinental Institute for Social Research. It's second time that we meet in a seminar. She's going to speak to us, also elaborating on our theme, which we have said, instability on the continent and the African continental free trade area, the constructing implications. We are, as the African Diaspora Forum, an organization that deals with the migrants, and one of the challenges that we face is that many countries across the continent, they see South Africa as industrialized. So you have migration that is down south. It is not spreading across the continent, and you know the challenges that it then brings. My sister.